The golden rays of the morning sun barely touched the glass facade of Anderson Enterprises when Peter Anderson stepped through its sleek, revolving doors. His polished black shoes clicked sharply against the marble floors of the lobby, a sound that commanded quiet reverence. The faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee lingered in the air, but Peter hardly noticed. Clad in a perfectly tailored suit and exuding quiet authority, Peter carried an air of confidence that made employees instinctively straighten their backs as he passed. Yet beneath the composed exterior, the man was weary. The faint shadows under his sharp gray eyes betrayed nights of restlessness, nights spent agonizing over the deal that could either solidify his empire or crumble it. As the elevator doors slid closed behind him, Peter let out a barely audible sigh. The foreign investors were wavering, their hesitation weighing on him like a stone. He needed to spark something unexpected, something real to set this deal apart. When the elevator chimed softly and opened on the 49th floor, Peter was greeted by Avia, his reliable assistant of many years. She handed him his morning coffee with practiced precision. "Good morning, Mr. Anderson," Ava said, her voice steady and warm. "The reports you requested are on your desk, and your video call with Tokyo is confirmed for 10 a.m. Peter nodded, murmuring his thanks as he walked toward his office. But as he approached, a sudden movement in the corridor caught his attention. There, wiping the windows with careful diligence, stood Anna Smith, a woman in her mid-40s, her modest janitor's uniform incongruous against the pristine, corporate world around her. But it wasn't her presence that stopped Peter in his tracks. It was the way she worked. Each motion was deliberate and full of purpose, as though the simple act of cleaning windows was her life's calling. A soft smile lit up her face, unaffected by the sterile, unfeeling energy of the executive floor. Peter's brow furrowed as curiosity tugged at him. He turned slightly to Ava, lowering his voice. "Ava," he asked, almost as an afterthought, "who is that woman?" Ava followed his gaze. "That's Anna Smith, sir. She's been with us about 6 months. One of the hardest workers I've seen. Quiet, dependable, never complains about a thing." Peter lingered for a moment longer, his eyes tracing the woman's movements. There was something so genuine about her, a stark contrast to the polished and calculated personas that surrounded him daily. Unable to focus on the mountain of reports in front of him, Peter found his thoughts returning to Anna Smith. Her authenticity lingered in his mind like an idea not yet formed. Acting on instinct more than logic, Peter reached for the intercom. "Ava," he said, his voice firm but uncertain, "I need you to do something unusual." Moments later, Ava entered his office, her brow slightly raised. "Sir." Peter looked up, his resolve solidifying as he spoke. "I want you to purchase the most elegant dress you can find and give it to Mrs. Smith. Then invite her to join tomorrow's meeting with the investors." Ava blinked, stunned into silence. "Mr. Anderson, are you sure she's a janitor?" Peter met her eyes, unflinching. "I know exactly who she is, Ava. But there's something about her and authenticity that I believe could be the difference we need. Trust me." With no further argument, Ava left to carry out the unusual request, though her expression betrayed her doubt. As the door closed, Peter leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. Inviting a janitor into such a critical negotiation, it bordered on madness. But deep in his gut, Peter knew it was right. Hours later, Anna was nearing the end of her shift when Ava approached her, a polished package in her hands and an expression of restrained disbelief. "Mrs. Smith," Ava began carefully, "Mr. Anderson would like to see you in his office. Now." Anna froze, glancing down at her roughened hands and stained uniform. Her voice shook. "Me? But why?" Without answering directly, Ava held out the package. "He asked you to wear this." With trembling hands, Anna accepted the box and opened it. Inside, nestled against delicate tissue paper, was the most exquisite navy blue dress she had ever seen. Her breath caught in her throat. There, There must be some mistake, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Ava shook her head gently. There's no mistake, Mrs. Smith. Change into it and come with me. Minutes later, Anna stood outside Peter Anderson's office, her heart pounding in her chest. The dress fit her perfectly, hugging her figure in ways that made her feel both seen and vulnerable. She knocked softly, and Peter's voice beckoned her in. As Anna stepped into the sprawling office, she felt like she had entered another world. The leather chairs, the panoramic view of the city skyline, it was all so overwhelming. Peter stood to greet her, and for a moment he simply looked at her, his expression unreadable. Mrs. Smith, he said, his voice softer than usual, thank you for coming. Please have a seat. Anna lowered herself into the chair, her hands nervously clutching the edge of her dress. Mr. Anderson, I don't understand. Why am I here? Peter studied her for a long moment before speaking. Anna, I've been watching you. Your dedication, your honesty, it's rare, and it's exactly what we need for tomorrow's meeting. The investors need to see something real, something they can trust. That's you. Anna blinked, disbelieving. Me? But I'm just a janitor. What could I possibly bring to a business negotiation? A faint smile tugged at Peter's lips. Sometimes what we think is our greatest weakness becomes our greatest strength. Your perspective, your truth can be exactly what sets us apart. Peter explained the details of the deal, outlining the role he hoped Anna would play. As he spoke, Anna's fear began to mix with an unfamiliar feeling excitement. It was an opportunity she had never dreamed of, a chance to prove to herself and the world that she was more than anyone had ever seen. I don't know if I can do it, Anna admitted finally, her voice trembling. Peter leaned forward, his gaze steady and kind. Anna, I believe you can. More than that, I believe you should. Sometimes life hands us a moment where we can either hide or step forward. I think this is your moment. Anna swallowed hard, her chest rising with a deep, shuddering breath. She had spent her life in the background unseen, but now she had a chance to step forward. Okay, she said, her voice stronger than before. I'll do it. Peter's smile was genuine, the warmth reaching his tired eyes. Excellent. Get ready, Anna. Tomorrow we're going to surprise everyone. As she left his office, Anna felt her heart pounding not from fear, but from something far more powerful possibility. The sun had just begun to rise, its pale light filtering through the curtains of Anna Smith's small, modest apartment. She sat up in bed, her heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and disbelief. It wasn't a dream. There, hanging in her narrow closet, was a stunning navy blue dress, a dress that didn't belong to her world. Anna's hands shook slightly as she moved through her morning routine. Every movement stirring her coffee, buttering her toast felt deliberate, heavy with meaning. It was as though the universe itself was waiting, holding its breath, watching what she would do next. Pausing by the kitchen window, Anna caught her reflection in the glass, a woman in her 40s, her face etched with years of unremarkable days. Yet this morning, there was something new, something she hadn't seen in a long time. Hope. You can do this, Anna, she whispered, her voice barely audible. For the first time, her eyes filled with equal parts fear and resolve seemed to believe it. At precisely 8 a.m., the doorbell rang. Anna froze for a second, staring at the door before finally opening it. Ava, Mr. Anderson's efficient and composed assistant, stood there with a team of people stylists and makeup artists, all carrying large bags and determined expressions. Good morning, Mrs. Smith, Ava said warmly, her professional smile unwavering. We're here to get you ready for today's meeting. Anna's throat tightened. I didn't expect all this, she stammered. Ava's tone softened. Mr. Anderson wants to make sure you feel comfortable and confident. Shall we begin? The next few hours swept Anna into a whirlwind, unlike anything she had ever experienced. Her hair was washed and styled with meticulous care, the knots and rough edges smoothed away. Her hands, calloused from years of labor, were given careful attention, her nails filed and polished to an elegant shine. As the makeup artist gently applied creams and powders to her face, Anna sat quietly, staring at her reflection. The woman in the mirror was both a stranger and an old friend, a version of herself she'd buried under years of invisibility. The makeup artist paused, noticing Anna's distant gaze. "You okay, Mrs. Smith?" she asked gently. Anna blinked, pulling herself back to the present. "Yes, it's just. This all feels unreal." The woman smiled knowingly. Sometimes life surprises us in ways we never expect. And you know what? You look beautiful. Believe me. Anna's eyes widened as she took in the transformation. Her face glowed, her eyes now accentuated by soft shadows seemed to sparkle with untapped strength. When the time came, Ava helped her step into the dress. The fabric slid over her body like water, soft but structured, fitting her perfectly. Anna turned to the full-length mirror and gasped softly. For the first time in her life, she felt beautiful. "You're ready," Ava said with a smile, checking her watch. The car's waiting downstairs. The drive to Anderson Enterprises felt like a blur. Anna stared out the window of the luxury sedan as the city's skyscrapers loomed large, their steel and glass exteriors, reflecting a world that had always seemed beyond her reach. She felt like an imposter in someone else's story, a woman playing a role she wasn't sure she deserved. When they reached the building, Anna stepped into the grand lobby, feeling every pair of eyes turn toward her. Whispers floated around her like a mist. Employees who had once ignored her now stared openly, curiosity etched across their faces. But Ava, standing by her side, offered a steadying presence, a quiet reassurance that Anna wasn't alone. On the 49th floor, the elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing Peter Anderson waiting just beyond. He was impeccably dressed in a tailored gray suit, his posture commanding, but there was something softer in his expression as he looked at Anna. For the briefest moment, his gaze widened in surprise before settling into a small, approving smile. "Mrs. Smith," he said, his voice quieter than usual, "you look stunning." Anna felt warmth rush to her cheeks. "Thank you, Mr. Anderson. I barely recognize myself." Peter extended his arm, a rare gesture of kindness. "Shall we? The investors will arrive shortly." Anna hesitated for a moment before slipping her arm through his. As they walked side by side down the long corridor, she couldn't ignore the shocked stares from other executives. Many of these people had passed her countless times, never really seeing her. Now, their expressions ranged from disbelief to envy. The conference room was a vast, luxurious space with windows overlooking the sprawling city skyline. Anna took a deep breath, letting her eyes adjust to the grandeur before her. Peter turned to face her, his expression serious but kind. "Anna," he said softly, "I want you to know that I trust you, completely. It's your authenticity, your unique perspective that we need today. Don't forget that." Her chest tightened, but she nodded. "I'll do my best, Mr. Anderson." Moments later, the investors arrived. Leading the group was Mr. Kamaru, a dignified older man with sharp, discerning eyes. Anna stood to the side as Peter greeted them with the charm and confidence of a seasoned leader. Then, to her astonishment, Peter turned toward her. "Gentlemen," he announced, his voice carrying weight, "I'd like to introduce Mrs. Anna Smith. She brings a perspective I believe is invaluable to today's discussion." Every head turned toward Anna, and the room fell silent. Her palms felt clammy, her heart hammering against her ribs. But she remembered Peter's words, the trust he'd placed in her, and the version of herself she'd glimpsed in the mirror that morning. Taking a deep breath, Anna stepped forward. "It's a pleasure to meet you," she said, her voice trembling at first, but growing stronger with each word. "I'm honored to contribute to today's discussion and share what I've observed." To her surprise, Mr. Kamaru smiled, the lines of his face softening. "It's refreshing to see such a unique approach, Mr. Anderson," he said. "We look forward to hearing what Mrs. Smith has to say." For the first time, Anna felt the weight of her doubts begin to lift. In this room filled with power and influence, she was not just present, she mattered. And for the first time in her life, Anna Smith believed she had something truly worth offering. The air in the Anderson Enterprises boardroom hummed with quiet anticipation. Executives shuffled their notes, the investors sat with practiced stillness, and on the far side of the table, Anna Smith tried to steady her breathing. Her palms pressed against her lap, her pulse thudded in her ears like a beating drum. Sitting next to her, Peter Anderson, the CEO himself, shot her an encouraging glance as he rose from his chair. His voice, calm and confident, filled the room as he began his presentation. Peter navigated effortlessly through numbers and projections, charts glowing on the screen behind him. His words were sharp, precise, and polished, everything a seasoned businessman should be. Anna sat still, a quiet observer, amazed by how Peter commanded the room. Yet, amidst the foreign investors' stoic expressions, their sharp gazes occasionally flicked toward her, as if trying to solve a puzzle. Why was she here? When Peter's presentation finally came to an end, he turned to Anna. His smile was firm, but beneath it, she caught a trace of something else: trust. "And now," Peter said, his voice lowering slightly, "I'd like you to hear from Mrs. Smith. Her unique perspective has proven invaluable, and I believe it is critical to understanding the heart of our vision." All eyes turned toward her. Anna could feel them, the doubt, the curiosity, the disbelief. For a fleeting second, panic clawed at her throat. But then, as her fingers brushed the fabric of the elegant dress Peter had given her, she remembered. She wasn't just Anna in a dress. She was Anna Smith, the woman who had spent years walking the quiet corridors of this building, listening, noticing, understanding. Slowly, she rose to her feet. Her voice, though soft at first, carried surprising steadiness. "Gentlemen," she began, her eyes meeting theirs, "I may not have years of experience in boardrooms or financial strategy, but I have something else, something I believe is just as valuable a view from the ground level. A perspective from the people who make this company run." There was a pause, a ripple of uncertainty in the room, but Anna didn't stop. She spoke of what she saw every day, the quiet dedication of the employees who arrived before dawn and stayed long after dark. She described the inefficiencies no one on the executive floor noticed, and the conversations she overheard, ideas, frustrations, dreams, all of which revealed the true pulse of the company. Her voice grew stronger, steadier, as she painted a picture of a workforce full of loyalty and potential, yet often overlooked. "What I'm describing," Peter interjected smoothly, "is something you won't find on a spreadsheet or buried in data. It's the soul of our company, the heart that keeps it alive." The investors exchanged glances, their expressions softening. One of them, Mr. Kamaru, leaned forward with genuine interest. "Mrs. Smith," he said, his voice warm, "this is refreshing. From where you stand, what would you say about the company's potential for growth?" Anna hesitated for only a moment before finding her voice again. She spoke of conversations she had heard among frontline staff, brilliant ideas left unheard, bottlenecks that no one higher up had noticed. She talked about unlocking the untapped potential of the people who believed in the company, even when the company had long overlooked them. With each word, Anna watched the shift in the room. The investors were leaning forward now, fully engaged. Even Peter watched her with a mixture of pride and admiration, as though seeing her for the first time. But not everyone was pleased. Out of the corner of her eye, Anna noticed William Reed, the company's CFO, frowning darkly. His lips moved in hurried whispers to the executives nearest to him. Disapproval radiated off him like heat. When the meeting broke for lunch, Anna was surrounded almost immediately. The investors, usually so formal and distant, approached her with genuine curiosity, asking questions and listening intently to her responses. Peter lingered nearby, his pride evident in his small, encouraging smiles. As she followed the group toward the executive lunchroom, Anna's steps faltered at the sound of hushed voices. "This is absurd," William Reed hissed to another executive, just out of sight. "Has Anderson completely lost it? Bringing in a janitor to speak for the company? He's risking everything we've built." The words hit Anna like a punch to the stomach, stealing her breath. Her heart sank as the reality of her position came crashing down. She didn't belong here. To them, she was nothing but an intruder, a reminder of a world they didn't care to acknowledge. Peter appeared at her side, sensing the hesitation. His voice was low, gentle. "Everything all right, Anna?" She forced a small smile, nodding stiffly. "Yes, just overwhelmed, I guess." Lunch was a blur of silverware clinking and polite chatter. Anna sat among some of the most powerful minds in business, but the weight of William's words lingered like a shadow. She struggled to keep up with discussions of mergers, profits, and market projections, her hands trembling as she tried to remember which fork to use. Across the table, William's cold stare reminded her of just how unwelcome she was. When the meeting resumed in the afternoon, Anna could feel the expectations pressing down on her shoulders. The investors wanted more from her. The skeptical executives, led by William, waited hungrily for a mistake. But Anna had made up her mind. She wouldn't, pretend to be someone she wasn't. Slowly, she rose to her feet once more, her voice trembling before it found its strength. "Gentlemen," she began, "I want to be completely honest with you. Until yesterday, I was just a janitor here at Anderson Enterprises. I don't have an MBA. I don't know half the financial terms I've heard today." The room fell into stunned silence. Peter's surprise was evident, but he said nothing, trusting her to continue. "What I do know," Anna continued, her voice clear now, "is the value of the people who work here. I know their fears, their frustrations, their dedication, and that understanding it matters, because they matter. This company is more than numbers. It's built on the backs of people who believe in its future." Then she did the unthinkable. She offered solutions, real, practical ideas to increase efficiency without sacrificing jobs, to improve morale, to bridge the gap between executives and employees. When she finished, the silence was deafening. Then, slowly, Mr. Camaro began to clap. One by one, the other investors followed, their applause filled with something unmistakable respect. Peter seized the moment, his voice full of conviction. "That, gentlemen, is the kind of perspective that will take this company into the future." The remainder of the meeting blurred for Anna Smith. When it finally ended, she felt utterly drained but strangely triumphant. The adrenaline still hummed faintly through her veins as she replayed every word she had spoken. She had faced her fear. She had stood tall in a room where she once thought she didn't belong, and she had spoken her truth. As the investors rose to leave, Mr. Camardo approached her. The sharp lines of his face softened into an approving smile as he extended his hand. "Mrs. Smith, your honesty is refreshing. I look forward to seeing how your unique perspective will shape the future of this company." Anna's fingers trembled slightly as she shook his hand, barely able to process the weight of his compliment. Before she could collect herself, Peter Anderson appeared at her side, his expression a mixture of awe, pride, and something unreadable. "Anna," Peter began, his voice low and earnest, "what you did back there was extraordinary. Risky, yes, but extraordinary." Before she could find the right words to respond, a sharp voice cut through the air like ice. "Anderson, we need to talk. Now." It was William Reed, the company's CFO. His expression was tightly controlled, but his fury simmered just below the surface. Peter gave Anna a small nod before following William toward a corner of the room, where the two men launched into a heated exchange. Anna remained rooted to the spot, watching the day's events finally settle on her shoulders. The weight was both exhilarating and daunting. She had overcome her first real test, but she knew deep down it was only the beginning. The corporate world she had glimpsed was vast, intricate, and far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Still, for the first time in her life, Anna Smith believed she had something truly valuable to offer. Whatever lay ahead, she would not waste this opportunity. The sun sank slowly into the horizon, casting warm streaks of amber and pink across the city skyline. When Peter Anderson finally left the office that evening, the day's events swirled like a storm in his mind. Anna's unexpected triumph should have filled him with unrestrained pride. Instead, the weight of what followed William's accusations, the skepticism of other executives gnawed at him. The hum of the city lights blurred through his windshield as he drove home, his thoughts a tangle of what-ifs and what next. Pulling into the quiet driveway of Peter's mansion, he shut off the engine and sat still for a moment, gripping the steering wheel as silence settled over him like a heavy blanket. Once inside, the echo of his footsteps followed him down the hallway, amplifying the loneliness of the cavernous house. As Peter paused before a framed photograph on the wall, the air in the room shifted. The image Sarah, his late wife, smiling with effortless joy against a sunlit beach, hit him with familiar grief. It had been years, but the pain remained sharp, like an old wound reopened at the slightest touch. A soft voice broke the silence. "Dad." Peter turned to see Sophia, his 12-year-old daughter, standing in her bedroom doorway. The resemblance to Sarah was striking. Her eyes held the same quiet wisdom, the same gentle concern. Peter managed a faint smile. "Hey, sweetheart, how was your day?" Sophia shrugged, a small gesture that spoke volumes. "It was okay," I guess she hesitated before adding softly, "Mrs. Thompson asked for you again. You missed another parent-teacher meeting." The words struck him like a punch to the gut. He had forgotten. Again. Peter exhaled shakily, running a hand through his hair. "Sophia, I'm so sorry. I promise I'll be there next time." Sophia nodded, but her eyes betrayed her disappointment. "It's fine, Dad. You're busy. I get it." She turned and disappeared into her room, leaving Peter standing alone in the hallway, drowning in guilt. Since Sarah's death, he had buried himself in work, believing it would numb the loss. Instead, it had built a wall that kept him from the one person who needed him most. Later, in his dimly lit home office, Peter poured himself a glass of whiskey. He let his gaze settle on the scattered papers strewn across his desk, unfinished divorce papers Sarah never signed, stacks of medical bills from her battle with cancer, and pamphlets on grief counseling he had never opened. The weight of everything he'd suppressed for years finally broke him. Tears slid silently down his face, tears he had denied himself for far too long. He leaned back in his chair, the empty house pressing down on him. The sudden ring of his phone startled him. He hesitated before answering. "Mr. Anderson." It was Anna's voice, tentative, unsure. "Sorry to call so late. I wanted to thank you for today, for trusting me, and I wanted to make sure you're okay. You seemed shaken after the meeting." Her words, so unexpected, broke through Peter's defenses. There was no judgment in her tone, no agenda, just genuine concern. For a moment he considered brushing her off with polite words, but something about Anna's sincerity made him pause. "To be honest, Anna," he admitted, his voice hoarse with emotion, "things haven't been okay. Not for a long time." He surprised even himself as he spoke, the words spilling out like a flood. He told her about Sarah, her illness, her strength, her loss. He spoke of Sophia and how he feared he was failing her. He confessed to the relentless pressure of holding Anderson Enterprises together while his personal world crumbled around him. Anna listened quietly, offering no interruptions, only soft, understanding words when he faltered. Her compassion, so uncharacteristic of the ruthless corporate world he inhabited, felt like a balm against an open wound. Finally, Anna spoke. Her voice was gentle, but there was a quiet strength behind her words. "Mr. Anderson, Peter, you don't have to carry all of this alone. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is ask for help. You don't have to prove anything to anyone." Her words hit him with unexpected force. In his desperate attempt to appear unshakable, Peter realized he had isolated himself. But Anna was right. Perhaps it was time to stop holding everything in. "Thank you, Anna," he said quietly, his voice breaking slightly. "I needed to hear that tonight." After the call ended, Peter sat in the silence of his office, the weight on his chest finally beginning to ease. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, he could find his way back. After ending the call, Peter Anderson sat in the stillness of his office, the silence pressing in on him like a heavy fog. The weight of the day, the triumphs, the doubts, the conversations settled deep in his chest. Then, almost instinctively, he stood, driven by a resolve he hadn't felt in months. He made his way to his daughter's room and knocked softly on the door. "Sophia, may I come in?" Inside, he found Sophia Anderson sitting cross-legged on her bed, clutching the worn teddy bear her mother had given her long ago. Her small shoulders hunched forward, and her red, puffy eyes revealed the tears she'd been trying to hide. Peter sat beside her, the mattress dipping slightly under his weight. The sight of his daughter like this, so small and fragile, made his heart ache. He hesitated for a moment before speaking, his voice rough with regret. "Sophia, I'm sorry, I haven't been the father you deserve." Sophia turned to look at him, her face carrying the quiet sadness of someone far older than her 12 years. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I miss Mommy." Peter's throat tightened as he pulled her close, wrapping her in his arms. "Me too, sweetheart," he said softly, his voice breaking. "Me too." For the first time since Ava's passing, the two of them allowed themselves to share their grief openly. Tears fell freely as father and daughter clung to one another, finding comfort in their shared loss. It was a moment of vulnerability that, though raw and painful, also carried a sliver of healing, like the first crack of light breaking through a storm cloud. That night, after tucking Sophia into bed, Peter lingered by her door for a moment. Watching her sleep, her breathing steady and calm, he made a silent vow. To her, to Ava, to himself. He would be better. He would find a way to balance the burdens of work and the needs of his daughter. He would let himself grieve, let himself heal, and learn to open his heart again. As he closed the door softly behind him, Peter felt a strange sense of lightness settle over him. It wasn't relief exactly, there was still much to be done, much to repair, but it was hope. For the first time in a long time, he believed tomorrow could be different. Returning to his office, Peter paused at his desk, staring at the stack of papers that had haunted him for months. The divorce documents, unfinished and unsent. The unpaid medical bills, cruel reminders of a fight they hadn't won. The unopened brochures on grief counseling, pages filled with empty advice. He picked up one of the leaflets and sat down, turning it over in his hands. Slowly, deliberately, he set it aside, not to forget it, but to face it. It was time to confront the pain he had been running from for so long. As he prepared for bed that night, his thoughts drifted back to Anna Smith. Her courage in the boardroom, her gentle kindness over the phone, two small but powerful acts that had stirred something inside him. Change, he realized, wasn't always a grand, sweeping moment. Sometimes it started with something quiet and simple, the decision to try. Tomorrow would bring challenges, yes, but it would also bring possibilities. For the first time in years, Peter Anderson felt ready to face them. The next morning, Anderson Enterprises buzzed with its usual rhythm, voices humming, phones ringing, keyboards clacking in a steady, familiar symphony. For most, it was just another Wednesday, but for Anna Smith, it felt like standing in the middle of a roaring hurricane. Every sound seemed louder, every movement sharper. Sitting at her sleek new desk in the far corner of the 49th floor, Anna struggled to focus on the glowing screen in front of her. Numbers and charts swam together, a whirlwind of financial data that felt foreign and impossible to decipher. Her fingers hovered uncertainly over the keyboard when a familiar voice pulled her from her thoughts. How are you holding up, Anna? Anna looked up to see Peter Anderson standing beside her desk, his expression kind but observant. His sharp suit couldn't hide the weariness that still lingered in his eyes, though his voice carried the steady reassurance of a man who believed in her. I'm trying, Mr. Anderson, Anna admitted, her voice soft but determined. There's so much to learn. Peter offered her an encouraging nod. You're doing better than you think, Anna. More than well. Actually, he paused, his gaze steady. That's why I have another challenge for you. Anna's heart stuttered in her chest. Another challenge, she repeated faintly. Peter's mouth quirked into the faintest of smiles, though his tone was serious. The investors were impressed by your perspective yesterday. They want to hear more. So you're going to lead the next presentation. The color drained from Anna's face. She gripped the edge of her desk as though it might anchor her. Me? But Mr. Anderson, I don't even understand half of what's in those reports. How am I supposed to lead a presentation? Peter leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. Anna, you have something no one else in this room has a genuine connection to the heart of this company. The investors don't want another set of polished figures. They want to understand the people behind the numbers, and no one can tell that story better than you. His words hung in the air like a lifeline, steadying her even as the weight of the responsibility settled over her. When Anna asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Friday, Peter's tone was gentle but firm. 2 days. I'll assign a team to help you pull it together. Don't worry about the details, we'll support you every step of the way. As Peter walked away, Anna stared after him, her pulse pounding in her ears. 2 days to prepare. 48 hours to step into a role she had never imagined for herself. The panic clawed at her, threatening to drag her under. But beneath the fear, a quiet resolve began to take root. She had come this far. She had faced doubt, ridicule, and the overwhelming enormity of this world, and she had survived. 2 days, she told herself. I'll find a way. Because Anna Smith had learned something about herself in the past few days. She was stronger than she thought. And maybe, just maybe, she was exactly where she was meant to be. The next 48 hours were a whirlwind for Anna Smith. Papers piled high on her desk, spreadsheets filled with incomprehensible figures sprawled across her computer screen, and endless cups of coffee littered her workspace. She dove headfirst into the reports, determined to unearth the real stories behind the numbers. Anna spent hours speaking to employees across every level of Anderson Enterprises, learning their experiences, listening to their frustrations, and collecting insights that would breathe life into cold, sterile data. The faces she spoke to reminded her of her own hard working, often overlooked, but essential to the company's heart. But not everyone watched her efforts with admiration. As Anna passed through hallways and open offices, whispers followed her, some curious, some impressed, others quietly resentful. Among them, William Reed's glare was the hardest to ignore. His disapproving eyes followed her movements with a mixture of disdain and suspicion, a silent challenge she couldn't shake. By the evening before her presentation, exhaustion draped over Anna like a heavy coat. Her office, still unfamiliar, was dimly lit, its silence broken only by the scratch of her pen and the hum of her computer. Her shoulders slumped, and her hair fell in loose strands around her weary face. Empty coffee cups sat abandoned on the corner of her desk like trophies of a long-fought battle. A gentle knock startled her. Looking up, she saw Sophia Anderson, Peter's 12-year-old daughter, peeking shyly through the door frame. "Hi," Sophia said softly. "Dad said you were still working. I thought, maybe you'd want some company." Anna blinked in surprise, then smiled a warm, grateful smile that softened the lines of fatigue on her face. "Thank you, Sophia. I could use some company right now." Sophia settled into the chair across from Anna, curling her legs underneath her as she watched quietly. In the dim light, Anna couldn't help but notice how much Sophia resembled her father. The same sharp, determined eyes. The same strong set of her jaw. Yet there was a softness in the girl, a vulnerability untouched by the burdens Peter carried. After a few moments, Sophia broke the silence. "Dad talks about you a lot, you know. He says you're changing things here." Anna felt her cheeks flush. She looked down, fidgeting with the edge of a paper. "Your dad's being very kind." "I'm just doing my best," Anna replied softly. Sophia tilted her head, curiosity flickering in her gaze. "What's it like, going from a janitor to?" This she gestured to the office around them. Anna paused, the weight of the question settling on her shoulders. She looked up at the girl and answered honestly. "It's terrifying," she admitted. "Most days I feel like I'm pretending, like someone will figure out I don't belong here. But then I remember something. I'm not doing this for myself. I'm doing it for the people who work here, the ones whose voices don't get heard." Sophia's expression turned thoughtful. "I think I get it," she said quietly. "It's like when Dad has to make hard choices. He always says it's for the good of everyone, even when it's tough." The words hit Anna like a quiet revelation. For the first time, she saw Peter Anderson not just as the powerful CEO, but as a man, one trying to balance impossible decisions and responsibilities. It stirred something inside her, a renewed understanding of why she was here and what she had to fight for. With that realization, Anna turned back to her work. Sophia stayed with her, playing the role of an unexpected assistant. Together, they organized notes, practiced snippets of the presentation, and even shared a few quiet laughs. For the first time in days, the weight on Anna's chest seemed to lift. By Friday morning, Anna was both physically drained and emotionally resolute. The first rays of the sun filtered into her small apartment as she stood in front of the mirror. The tailored suit Peter had insisted she wear fit perfectly simple, sharp, and dignified. It was a reflection of who she was now, no longer just the janitor in the shadows, but not yet a polished executive either. She was something different, something new. And maybe that was her greatest strength. Arriving at Anderson Enterprises, Anna stepped into the large conference room on the 49th floor, her heart thundering in her chest. The investors were already seated, their sharp eyes watching her with calculated curiosity. The executives lined the far side of the table, their expressions unreadable. At the head of the room stood Peter Anderson, his steady gaze locking onto hers. The air felt thick, every breath deliberate. For a fleeting second, Anna's legs threatened to freeze beneath her. But then she remembered Sophia's quiet encouragement, Peter's unwavering trust, and the countless stories she carried on her shoulders. Anna stepped forward. "Good morning," she began, her voice calm but steady, surprising even herself. "Today, I want to share a story not just of numbers or profits, but of the people who make this company what it is." As she spoke, her voice grew stronger, filled with quiet conviction. She told them what she had learned, stories of workers solving problems management didn't know existed, small inefficiencies that could be improved without sacrifices, and overlooked innovations hidden among everyday employees. She gave voice to the people who had carried the company's heart for years but had gone unnoticed. The room was silent. Investors who moments ago looked indifferent now leaned forward, their gazes focused intently on her. Even the skeptical executives listened, caught off guard by the clarity and truth of her words. When Anna finished, a pause hung in the air, heavy, expectant. Then Mr. Camaro began to applaud. One by one, others joined him, their faces marked with respect. Peter stood, his expression a mixture of pride and admiration. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying across the room, "this is the kind of vision we need not just for the future of Anderson Enterprises, but for the people who make it thrive." As the meeting adjourned, Anna allowed herself a quiet breath of relief. She had done it. Not for herself, but for every employee whose stories had shaped her words. Walking out of the room, Peter fell into step beside her. "You were incredible, Anna," he said, his voice warm with sincerity. Anna smiled faintly, her heart still racing. I just told the truth. That's all." Peter nodded, his gaze thoughtful. Sometimes that's all it takes to change everything. And as Anna looked out across the bustling office floor, she knew this was just the beginning, not only for the company but for herself. For the first time in her life, she wasn't invisible. She had found her voice. And the world was listening. The following weeks blurred into a relentless cycle of work for Anna Smith. She threw herself into the task Peter had entrusted to her, spending long hours combing through reports, walking factory floors, and listening to employees from every level of Anderson Enterprises. Each story she heard and each piece of data she uncovered became a thread in the tapestry she was determined to weave, one that proved her approach was not only valid but necessary. But with progress came pressure. Anna could feel it like a weight pressing against her chest. She was caught between two worlds, straddling a fine line, no longer just the janitor but not yet accepted as a true executive. Whispers followed her wherever she went, admiring, curious, and at times cutting with envy and resentment. The coldest glare came from William Reed, the company's CFO. He rarely spoke to her directly, but his disdain was palpable in every boardroom glance and hushed conversation. Late one evening, when most of the office had emptied, Anna was still in her corner, surrounded by papers and a half-empty cup of coffee that had long gone cold. A raised voice suddenly broke the silence, leaking through the crack of Peter Anderson's office door. Anna hesitated, her pen stilled mid-scribble, but the sharp tone of William Reed's voice carried clearly. "You're throwing everything away, Peter." Anna's heart sank as she caught the anger in Reed's words. "First you bring that janitor into executive meetings, and now you're handing her critical projects? Have you completely lost your judgment?" Peter's reply was quieter, his voice taut but unwavering. "Watch your words, William. Anna brought something to this company that we've been missing for years. She has a perspective we need, one we've overlooked because we spent too long up here in our ivory tower." William's voice rose, laced with contempt. "She's going to ruin us, and you're too blind to see it." Anna stepped back into the shadows, her pulse pounding in her ears. She knew her presence had ruffled feathers, but hearing it confirmed so blatantly stung. That night, as she sat in her small apartment, sleep eluded her. Doubts, sharp and relentless, crept into her mind. Had she made a mistake? Was she out of her depth? Maybe William was right, and she was causing more harm than good. The next morning, with dark circles under her eyes and determination battling against her growing fears, Anna headed straight for Peter's office. She had to say something, even if it meant stepping down. She couldn't allow herself to be the cause of conflict or failure. But when she walked in, her words faltered. Peter sat slumped in his chair, gazing through the tall window, his back to the door. The early light painted the room in gold, but his silhouette looked tired and burdened. Beside him, on the edge of his desk, sat a framed photo of his late wife and daughter, Sophia Anderson. "Mr. Anderson," Anna's voice was soft, hesitant. Peter turned to her slowly, and for the first time she saw the exhaustion in his eyes. The man who so often carried the weight of the company with unwavering strength now looked human, vulnerable. "Anna," he said, his voice rougher than usual. I'm sorry you had to hear that argument last night." Anna stood still for a moment, her carefully prepared words slipping away. She had come ready to quit, to flee from this daunting role. But in that moment, seeing the weight Peter carried, she realized she couldn't. Stepping forward, she sat down in the chair across from him. "Mr. Anderson, Peter," she began, her tone steady but gentle. "We need to talk. About everything. About the company, our expectations, the challenges we're facing." The conversation that followed unfolded like sunlight breaking through a storm. It wasn't hurried or formal. It was raw, honest, and long overdue. Peter opened up about his fears, his struggles to balance fatherhood and leadership, his mistakes, and his relentless drive to keep his late wife's dreams alive. Anna, too, let her guard down, confessing the crushing pressure she felt to prove herself. She spoke of her doubts, the voices whispering that she didn't belong, and the weight of trying to carry the trust he had placed in her. By the time they were done, the room felt lighter. The tension that had weighed on both of them seemed to dissolve. Peter leaned back in his chair, a genuine smile, small but sincere, crossing his face. "Anna," he said softly, "thank you. For your honesty, for your courage, and for believing in what we're doing here. I don't know exactly what lies ahead for this company, but I do know that with you on this team, we have a real chance." Anna smiled back, a quiet resolve taking root inside her. "We'll figure it out together," she replied. When Anna left Peter's office that morning, the day seemed brighter somehow. The challenges ahead still loomed, but now she carried more than just the responsibilities he had given her. She carried trust, connection, and a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just the janitor anymore, nor was she a faceless executive in a polished suit. She was Anna Smith, a woman who had something rare and valuable to offer, and she would not let that go to waste. The autumn sun streamed through the large windows of her office on the 49th floor. From her vantage point, Anna Smith could see the city sprawling below, its buildings glowing in hues of gold and crimson. For a moment, her fingertips rested lightly against the cool glass, as if reaching for the life she'd left behind. 6 months. 6 months since Peter Anderson had taken a chance on her. 6 months of challenges, doubts, growth, and transformation. She had become something else, no longer invisible but not wholly part of the corporate elite. She was the bridge between two worlds that had never truly understood each other. A soft knock broke her thoughts. "Come in," Anna said, turning to see Peter step into her office. His smile, though tired, was warm. "Ready for the big meeting?" he asked. Anna took a steadying breath, the familiar flutter of nerves in her chest. "As ready as I'll ever be. I still can't believe we've come this far." Peter walked closer, resting a hand gently on her shoulder. "It's because of you, Anna. Your insight, your perspective. You've made a difference here." His words warmed her heart, though they carried a twinge of guilt. She hesitated, the weight of a hidden truth gnawing at her resolve. "Peter," she began cautiously, "there's something I need to tell you before." The door burst open before she could finish. William Reed strode in, his sharp eyes glinting with thinly veiled malice. "The investors are here," he announced, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "and they're especially eager to see our rising star." Peter's posture stiffened, his tone clipped. "We'll be right there, William." As William disappeared down the hall, Anna felt her pulse quicken. She wasn't ready for this, not yet. "Peter," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I need to tell you something." But Peter was already heading for the door, his focus laser sharp. "Whatever it is, Anna, it'll have to wait. We can't keep them waiting." With a resigned sigh, Anna followed. Every step toward the conference room felt heavier than the last, but she straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. Whatever happened next, she knew it was time to face it. For the people who had trusted her. For Peter. For herself. As Anna Smith and Peter Anderson stepped into the conference room, a heavy tension clung to the air like a storm waiting to break. Around the polished mahogany table sat the investors, stern men and women with discerning eyes, impatient, curious, and formidable. Yet it was one face that seized Anna's attention, an older gentleman with silver hair and a gaze so piercing it seemed to unravel the truth hidden deep inside her. Peter stood tall, his voice confident and steady as he launched into the presentation. He walked them through the strides Anderson Enterprises had made, the efficiency gains, the operational improvements, and the bright future they were shaping. And then he turned toward Anna, pride unmistakable in his tone. "And now," Peter announced, his smile warm yet resolute, "I'd like to hand this over to the person who made it all possible, Anna Smith." Anna rose slowly, her hands trembling faintly as she straightened the papers before her. The silence that greeted her felt immense, oppressive. Her gaze flicked across the room. Peter, his eyes shining with confidence. William Reed, his expression a mask of cold suspicion, and finally, the older man, watching her with an unsettling intensity. Taking a deep breath, Anna forced her voice to remain steady. "Before I begin my presentation," she began, her words deliberate, "there's something I need to share. Something I uncovered during my investigation that not only impacts this company's history but also my own." A ripple of murmurs swept through the room, confusion and anticipation spreading like wildfire. Peter's brow furrowed, but he said nothing, waiting for her to continue. Anna drew in another breath, gathering her courage. "While analyzing the company's financial records, I found a series of questionable transactions dating back 25 years. Transactions that drove a small family business into bankruptcy and left a child abandoned in the aftermath." The air turned still, heavy with unspoken words. The pounding of Anna's own heart echoed in her ears. "That child," she said softly but firmly, "was me." Gasps filled the room, sharp and unrestrained. Peter froze, his eyes wide with disbelief. But it was the older man, Mr. Kamaru, who became the room's epicenter. Slowly he pushed back his chair, his face pale, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. He stood, his voice raw and trembling. "Anna," he whispered, the name barely escaping his lips. I'm your father." The room descended into chaos. Investors spoke over one another in shock, voices rising into a cacophony of confusion. William Reed's voice broke through the noise with angry accusations of conspiracy and deceit. But for Anna, the room's noise faded into insignificance. In that moment, all that existed was her and the man who had just claimed to be her father, the man who had unknowingly shaped the painful void in her life. Her voice, when she spoke, was barely above a whisper, yet carried an edge of emotion. "Why?" Mr. Kamaru took a hesitant step toward her, his hands shaking as though the weight of the years had finally broken him. "I made terrible choices, Anna. Choices I've regretted every day since. Losing the company destroyed me, I thought. I thought you'd be better off without me." His words hung in the air like a confession, decades in the making, laden with regret, shame, and the unmistakable grief of lost time. It was Peter who finally shattered the uneasy silence. His voice was calm, though his face remained etched with disbelief. "Anna," he asked carefully, "did you know this when you came to work here?" Anna turned to face him, shaking her head. "No, I only found out while going through the records. I wanted to tell you, but I didn't know how or when." Peter studied her, the pieces falling into place. "You're not here for revenge, are you?" Anna met his gaze with quiet conviction. "No, I'm here because this company has become my family. All of you, everyone who works here, you've given me a purpose I never knew I could have." Her words, simple yet heartfelt, seemed to reach across the table and settle into the hearts of those listening. Slowly, the room's tension began to lift. The investors exchanged looks, murmurs of understanding replacing the earlier chaos. Mr. Kamaru, now mere steps away from her, looked at his daughter with trembling hope. "Anna," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion, "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but if you'll allow me, I'd like a chance to try and make things right." Anna's gaze moved across the room at Peter, who had taken a risk on her when no one else would, at the investors, who were now looking at her with respect, and finally, back at the man who had been a ghost in her life for so long. After a long pause, she spoke softly but resolutely. "I think we all deserve a second chance." The days following the meeting were nothing short of transformative for Anderson Enterprises. News of the company's innovative direction, fueled by Anna Smith's unique perspective and courage, began to spread through boardrooms and business journals alike. Investors who once approached with caution now spoke with excitement and optimism. The once stagnant company began to bloom, new partnerships emerged, employee morale soared, and for the first time in years, Anderson Enterprises felt alive. Anna, however, was not basking in the praise. The task ahead still loomed large, and her work was far from finished. Sitting in her office on the 49th floor, surrounded by reports, her thoughts swirled with both determination and uncertainty. The sound of a knock pulled her back. "Come in," she said softly, rubbing her tired eyes. The door opened, and Peter Anderson stepped in. Despite the fatigue written on his face, there was a warmth in his expression. "You're working too hard," he said, leaning casually against the doorframe. Anna offered a small smile. "So are you." Peter chuckled and stepped inside, holding up 2 cups of coffee. "Then I guess we both need this." Anna accepted the coffee gratefully. As Peter settled into the chair across from her, he studied her thoughtfully. "Do you realize what you've done, Anna?" he asked quietly. Anna looked at him unsure. "I've done my job." Peter shook his head, his gaze unwavering. "You've done so much more. You've given this company its heart back. And you've given me hope I thought I'd lost forever." Anna looked down, her fingers tracing the rim of the coffee cup. "I don't know about all that, Peter. I'm just trying to do what's right. For everyone." Peter smiled softly. "And that's exactly why it's working. People believe in you, Anna. They trust you because you speak the truth. You've changed everything here, and it's only the beginning." His words touched something deep within her, a mix of pride and disbelief. Before she could reply, Peter's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and stood up. "Investors update meeting starts in 15. Come with me, you need to hear this." The conference room buzzed with quiet anticipation as executives and department heads gathered. For the first time in years, there was a palpable sense of unity, a collective belief that Anderson Enterprises was heading somewhere brighter. Anna stood next to Peter, clutching her notebook as the room settled. William Reed, ever skeptical, sat at the far end of the table, his sharp gaze darting between Peter and Anna. Peter cleared his throat and began. "Let's get started. I've asked for this meeting to review the latest figures." Ava, Peter's longtime assistant, stood and handed out documents. "These are the quarterly reports compiled as of yesterday." Anna couldn't help but hold her breath. These were the results of weeks of effort, her ideas, the employee input she had gathered, the changes Peter had bravely supported. The numbers would either prove them right or expose the risks they had taken. Peter flipped to the summary and read aloud. "Revenue has increased by 20% in the last quarter. Operational costs have decreased by 15% due to the efficiency measures implemented. Employee turnover is down by half, and most important of all, new partnerships are in negotiation stages." The room erupted in murmurs of astonishment. William Reed sat back, his brow furrowing in disbelief. Peter looked around the table, his voice steady. "These numbers don't lie. Our changes are working. We're not just surviving anymore, we're growing." Anna felt a surge of relief and pride. All those late nights, the countless interviews, the uphill battle for acceptance, it was paying off. A voice broke through the quiet. "It's remarkable." Everyone turned to see Mr. Kamaru, who had flown in again to observe the progress. His calm, deep voice carried weight in the room. "I was skeptical at first," Mr. Kamaru admitted, his gaze landing on Anna. "But what Ms. Smith has brought to Anderson Enterprises is invaluable. Her connection to the workforce, her unfiltered honesty, it's a rare strength. I am proud to have invested in this company." Peter's eyes found Anna's, and for a moment, everything else faded. She had done it. They had done it. As the meeting adjourned, Peter pulled Anna aside. "There's someone I think you need to talk to." Anna looked up at him, puzzled. "Who?" Peter smiled faintly. "Your father." Her heart skipped a beat. Since their first confrontation in front of the investors, Anna had avoided seeing him. The pain, the confusion, it was too raw. But now, standing in the hall, she realized Peter was right. She couldn't run forever. Peter led her to a quiet office where Mr. Kamaru sat, his hands folded on his lap, his posture hesitant. He stood when Anna entered, his face lined with regret. "Anna," he said softly. Anna stared at him for a long moment, her emotions warring within her. Finally she spoke. "Why now? Why come back after all this time?" He sighed, his voice thick with sorrow. "Because I saw you. I saw you standing in front of those investors, strong and unafraid. I saw the woman you've become, and I knew. I had to try. I had to try. I had to tell you the truth. I thought I was protecting you when I left. I was a broken man. And I thought my absence would give you a better life. But I was wrong, Anna. I robbed you of the father you deserved." Tears burned in Anna's eyes, but she blinked them back. "You can't undo what's been done." "No," he said quietly, "but I can try to make it right. If you'll let me." Silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of years lost. Finally, Anna spoke, her voice soft but firm. "It'll take time." A hint of a smile broke through his sadness. "I'm not going anywhere, Anna. I'll wait as long as it takes." Anna nodded, and for the first time the walls between them began to crumble. That evening, Anna sat alone in her office, her mind racing with thoughts. The success of the company, her father's return, it all felt overwhelming. A knock startled her. She turned to see Sophia Anderson, Peter's 12-year-old daughter, standing shyly at the door. "Hi, Anna. Anna smiled, surprised. "Sophia, what are you doing here?" Sophia stepped inside, holding a sketchbook in her hands. "Dad said you've been working too hard. I thought maybe you needed something to cheer you up." Anna chuckled softly. "And what's that?" Sophia opened the sketchbook, revealing a drawing of a woman in a beautiful suit, standing tall in front of a crowd. Beneath it, she had written "Anna Smith, brave and strong." Anna's throat tightened. "You drew this for me?" Sophia nodded. "You helped my dad smile again. And you helped everyone here believe they can do better. I think you're a hero." Anna blinked back tears, unable to find the words. She reached out and pulled Sophia into a gentle hug. "Thank you, Sophia. I think you're pretty amazing too." Sophia grinned and skipped off, leaving Anna with the sketch in her hands. It was a reminder, one she hadn't realized she needed, that her work mattered. Weeks later, Anderson Enterprises held its first company-wide celebration in years. The event hall buzzed with laughter, chatter, and a sense of triumph. Employees, executives, and even investors came together to celebrate their shared success. Anna stood near the back, watching as workers she had once cleaned alongside danced and mingled with executives who now saw their value. It was a sight she would never forget. Peter approached her, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. "You've been hiding back here long enough," he teased, offering her a glass. Anna accepted it with a smile. "I like seeing it all from here. It's beautiful." Peter clinked his glass lightly against hers. "That's because of you, Anna. You brought us together." Anna looked at him, her eyes reflecting the gratitude she felt. "No, we did this together. You believed in me when no one else did. You took the risk." Peter smiled, his expression soft. Sometimes the greatest risks lead to the greatest rewards. They stood together, watching the celebration unfold. Laughter echoed, friendships grew stronger, and hope filled the air. For Anna Smith, this moment was not just about success. It was about proving that every voice mattered, that people, not numbers, were at the heart of every great company. And for Peter Anderson, it was about redemption. It was about healing the cracks of the past and building something lasting for the future. As the evening drew to a close, Anna stood outside the hall, gazing up at the stars. Peter joined her, his hands in his pockets. "What's next for Anna Smith?" he asked. Anna smiled, her heart full. "I'm not sure. But I think the best is yet to come." Peter nodded, his voice gentle. "I think so too." In the quiet of the night, the city stretched out before them, a city full of possibilities, full of life. For Anna and Peter, this was only the beginning of a story built on trust, courage, and second chances. And as Anna walked away that night, she carried with her a renewed sense of purpose and the knowledge that she was exactly where she was meant to be. If this story of redemption, courage, and second chances has touched your heart, don't forget to hit the like button, share this video, and subscribe to our channel for more inspirational content. In today's story, we witnessed Anna Smith, a woman who began as an invisible janitor, but proved that the most powerful voices often come from unexpected places. Her journey at Anderson Enterprises was filled with challenges, skepticism, resistance, and the weight of her own insecurities, but through her honesty, resilience, and unwavering determination, she transformed not just the company, but also the lives of those around her. From Peter Anderson, a CEO burdened by loss and pressure, to the employees who finally felt seen and heard, Anna's courage became the bridge that brought people together. Along the way, she rebuilt relationships, healed wounds from the past, and reminded everyone that success is not just about numbers on a spreadsheet, it's about people, trust, and unity. This story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the most meaningful change begins with someone who dares to believe in themselves. Anna's journey speaks to all of us, no matter who we are or where we come from, that we all have the power to make a difference. Now, we'd love to hear from you. What part of this story resonated with you the most? Have you ever experienced a moment when believing in yourself changed everything? Share your thoughts, reflections, and experiences in the comments below. And if you believe this story could inspire someone you know, don't hesitate to share it with your friends and family. Your support means the world and keeps us motivated to bring you more uplifting and heartfelt stories. Thank you for being part of this journey. Together, we can spread hope and inspiration. Stay tuned for more incredible stories coming your way.